Hi, everybody. It's me, Rumble, and I'm back with another new design for one of my video game characters. If you've already seen my other videos, you're probably already familiar with my design process since I've gone over it a few times by now. This time, I'm going to shake things up a bit and go a little more in depth about each step, about the tools I use, and how I applied them when creating this character's new design. To start, I'm gonna refrain this time from showing you guys the initial sketch. It's not entirely due to embarrassment. Like, I will admit that it is a little horrifying showing off art from 5 years ago. But, mostly, when I first put this character to paper, he was kinda nothing. I didn't have a whole lot planned for him, and I certainly hadn't given a whole lot of thought to what kind of character he'd be, and it absolutely shows. I could essentially show you any white male background filler dude, and it wouldn't be fundamentally that different. Of course, I've been writing and brainstorming and planning a bunch in the past half a decade, and in the meantime, this placeholder of a character has become much more fleshed out. Which means I'm gonna have to put a lot more thought and care into his design if I'm gonna have that come across. Let's go ahead and look at his mood board while I talk some more about that actually. When I was designing Sai and Rudy, I pulled a fair amount of inspiration from characters in existing media and the many tropes that they fall under. You may already have heard before that tropes can be useful when executed well by engaging with an audience's existing knowledge to quickly set up expectations. You can reduce the amount of time it takes for a character to seem sympathetic or unsympathetic, and you can either run with those expectations or subvert them. For me, I want Sai and Rudy to be easy for players to get on board with being in control of. I don't necessarily want to recreate the character Joel from The Last of Us, but if someone decides to play because Sai sort of reminds them of Joel from The Last of Us, then that gives me the opportunity to let them see for themselves what kind of character Sai really is. So, what about this one then? Well, I don't anticipate that I'll need to evoke familiar character tropes to get people interested, because I'm not asking folks to play as them. Instead, I'm going to be relying more on the narrative to flesh him out, but that doesn't mean that I can't still use his appearance to communicate some things about him. Check out how much of his mood board is fashion references. And did you notice it yet? Maybe even noticed it without realizing it. The designs I made for Sai and Katla show that my setting is meant to be vaguely modern, kind of a half-assed amalgamation of the 20th century with no fixed date. For this character, I skewed the scale a little further towards the latter half, picking out fashions from the 60s and 70s. So, what's that tell you about this character? I think it's a good clue. I'll let you start guessing, and later you can see if you were right. So I've included natural inspiration for all of these mood boards so far to varying degrees. While some have been more literal, I've also hinted at some of the deeper meanings of the choices I've made. This one includes wild roses, red spotted purple butterflies, and the type of songbird called a varied thrush. Not all of the inspiration makes it into the final design, but I personally think it's cool when something really symbolic is able to be included. It's true that sometimes the curtains are just blue, but sometimes the curtains can be hand-woven shibori silk, and I'd love to see if anyone out there can figure out which is which. Alright, time for a change of scenery. I'll move on to the sketching stage, starting with the croquis. It's not a traditional fashion croquis, of course, since it's really just a makey version of the character in question, but I'm calling it a croquis because it's the base for all the different clothes I'm going to put on him. I sure did learn a lot of useful stuff about fashion design in college, including that I deeply despise the industry standard for sketching bodies, and you'll never ever hear me endorse the 9 heads method unless, and only unless, you happen to be designing clothes for Bayonetta. Sorry, that was a tangent. Anyway, I told you, didn't I? He's just a generic white boy underneath. Zowie. I just love me my little blonde bitches. It can't be helped. But if you guessed earlier that he would be one of the youth, good job! It's not all that unusual for sub-adult humans to be built like a matchstick, and this one's no different. And if this game comes out and you're watching this video retrospectively to glean valuable tidbits to aid you in your fanfiction, I only hope you can forgive me for that analogy. Unlike Rudy and Katla, which were much more focused on the silhouette and mostly involved tweaking smaller design elements, I had to go back to mixing and matching a bunch of clothing types, like how I did with Sai. It started to get tough too, because a lot of them ended up being absolute bangers. And this character is fashion forward enough in his personality that I could have seen him wearing any one of these outfits and pulling it off. Once I got to the last croquis though, I was able to pinpoint which pieces would work best for the story I wanted to tell with this design. I could pull elements from the bird inspiration into the fringe jacket, as well as deliberately make it a couple of sizes too big. While I struggled a lot with deciding on the colors and how I would use them, I wound up just pulling color directly from the nature images I used to even further integrate that juicy symbolism I talked about. It sure seemed futile for a while there, but I persevered. It's going to be a running theme in this video. Once I was happy with the little details, I moved on with the technicals. That's the official term for this kind of thing, by the way. Designers create these front and back view drawings to show to the manufacturer. That way they can know where everything should be placed and can work out the order of operations for production. I'm just doing them because I don't trust myself to not forget what everything is supposed to look like every time I draw a character in a situation. It's similar to a model sheet made for animation, but specifically for clothes. Sometimes there will be a glimpse of some part of the clothing that doesn't show up very often, and I like to know what that's supposed to look like ahead of time. Sometimes I do that for the character themselves. If they've got something detailed about their anatomy that I like to remain consistent across numerous drawings, but I don't think YouTube would let me share those kind of drawings with you. The decision to give this character glasses was kind of last minute, but I'm glad that I went with it. I know it's kind of a tired trope that bookish characters all wear glasses, but I decided to go ahead anyways after doing a little bit of research on what actually causes vision to worsen over time. Myopia is primarily caused by genetics, but certain things like spending a lot of time indoors, doing a lot of what's called near work like reading, writing, and needlework, or living in a part of the world with long dark winters can make someone's myopia worse. And I figured 2 out of 3 of those would be more than enough in terms of justification. And yeah, I've thought about which of my OCs have certain genetic conditions. Doesn't everyone? So when deciding on how I want a character to pose, I take into consideration a number of things. The character's personality, their habits, their job or role. I think about whether I want to include props or a particular action, and whether there's something about their design I want to emphasize or something that I want to remain hidden. Important to these profile illustrations in particular is a sense of consistency. I've been drawing everyone so far from a high angle perspective. It'd be strange if this character stood out by being shown head on or from below. Some of you watching might wonder why I decided to draw the entire nude body first, including all of the details right down to the belly button, even though I fully intend to draw over and erase most of it in the end. It's not just because I'm a pervert, but it's something I do to help me plan out how the different clothing items will fall, fold, or stretch over the body. It's probably not 100% necessary, but for me, it helps me to believably render these things rather than just guessing. And I think it helps a lot with making things seem three-dimensional even when drawn in a stylized way. Also, if it winds up looking a little wonky, I can more easily trace the steps back to where I went wrong in the first place, and I get less frustrated that way. Even though I really did start to get frustrated with this one arm angle, this is the sort of thing where I really could have used a reference photo to study and help me through it, but I was too impatient to find one online. And I'm gonna be real, I was hyperfixated, and I didn't think to snap a photo of someone doing the same pose. That really would have been the smart thing to do, but I didn't. Part of the problem is that I just haven't drawn a twig like this in ages. My fruits basket phase was over 20 years ago at this point. This rumble got rusty, man. Now, I know what you may be thinking. Gee, Rumble, I bet you're really regretting putting this boy in a fringe jacket right about now. Well, you're wrong. In fact, you ain't seen nothing yet. This level of tediousness is my bread and butter, baby. This is enrichment for me. It's the reason I get out of bed in the afternoon. Well, hopefully you can see now how the base outline helped to get me where I can decide how each bit of fringe falls. Yes? It doesn't just apply to tight-fitting garments. Even stiffer fabric like leather behaves a certain way as it interacts with the body and with gravity. Maybe you don't physically see those skinny arms in the end result, but the way that the jacket looks now is directly informed by where I position them, what they're doing, and even how much body mass is there. Just a little insight into my artistic process for you. You can even see how I broke the rules a bit. I didn't like how some of the fringe was altering the overall silhouette, so I found a way to move some off to the side so I could keep the flow going. Authenticity and style don't have to get in each other's way. You can add or subtract whatever you feel is right to get the outcome that you want. That's what makes art awesome. Photographers, directors, animators, writers, and all kinds of artists decide when and where they want to follow the rules and when they want to bend them to get the result that speaks most to them. So you'll notice that I chose to give this character a prop. This is another tool for visual storytelling. While you marvel at my uncanny ability to overdo it, I might as well tell you just a little bit about him in the meantime. I've told you about his youthfulness and his bookishness, and I'm sure you've picked up on his bright personality just by watching the sketch come together. He's fashionable, but wears a coat that's a few sizes bigger than he is, and has added a little bit of personal flair to. I've given him this flower basket full of freshly cut flowers, but he's not really dressed for gardening. Finally, he's got a friendship bracelet on his wrist, just like the one Sai wears. So is it all coming together? Yeah, this here is Joshua Hawthorne, Sai's beautiful baby boy. Well, a teenage boy. His beautiful teenage baby boy. It is a little embarrassing to admit just how little I had initially thought out this character, honestly. I mostly just whipped him up so he could put the D in DILF. Or, fuck, I shouldn't say that. Put the dad in DILF. But anyway, he started out really flat, is where I'm getting at. But in order to make Sai feel more three-dimensional, it only made sense to give his son more dimension as well. I thought about what he likes to do, who his friends are, plus what his relationship with Sai is like their inside jokes, how he expresses himself, and so on and so forth. Eventually, he evolved into the kind of character that gets to be included in the instructional pamphlet. If you know, you know. But yeah, Joshua still lives with Sai and is usually the one in charge of looking after the house. He did pretty well for himself in school and is certainly cut out for higher education, but he struggles a bit with motivation and can't seem to land a job if he's even trying to find one. Because Sai works nights and has to serve customers all shift long, Joshua is the one who cooks, although his cooking skills leave a bit to be desired. He's big on keeping things neat and tidy, but he has a habit of throwing objects at his dad's head when he's annoyed. Soft and light objects usually, but Sai knows well enough to watch out when there aren't any harmless items left within arm's reach. He volunteers at the local library, and as might be expected of a fashionable young lad, he hates to get his clothes dirty. That said, he still helps his dad out with gardening in his own way, earning his spending money by selling fresh cut flowers to the grocers in town. He has a tendency to sing to himself when he does his chores, making up his own tunes and lyrics to suit his mood. When the windows are open and he's really getting into it, it's possible to hear him singing from a few doors down, and so far none of the neighbors have complained. On the surface, the locals seem properly enamored with young Joshua, but not everything is sunshine and roses. A lot gets said to him behind his back, and a lot more gets said to his face, particularly about his dad. While Sai is fiercely protective of his boy, the same can be said of the reverse. And this hawthorn can be frighteningly calculated at setting things straight. Most people don't even know where this sudden misfortune is coming from, only that it started happening sometime after saying something particularly heinous, but Cy Hawthorne, where his son could hear it. By the way, it was really not intentional on my part to name him after two kinds of trees. That was just a happy accident. Um, I remember him going nameless for a while until I could think of something, and my hope was to come up with a name that gave off an innocent vibe. Then one day, when I was riding my bike home from work, I overheard this little kid who's maybe 5 or 6 calling after his friend. His voice was so cute. He was just like, Joshua, wait up. I wish I could do a proper impression. He was so cute. But I remember thinking, wow, that is a classic little boy name right there, Joshua. I know I could probably take credit for doing it on purpose, but honestly didn't know that Joshua trees were called Joshua trees until like way later. Like I've seen Joshua tree. I know what a Joshua tree is, but I didn't know that they were called Joshua trees until like after I had named the character Joshua. And like I don't know. I feel like the real reason that I decided on the name is a better origin story anyways. Like, I was just inspired by this little kid running after his friend. Joshua! Okay, so there's Sai's sweet baby boy. As always, feel free to let me know what you think in the comments section. As for what's next, I've been doing a lot of writing, I've been doing a lot of drafting, and like slowly taking the stuff that's currently floating around in my brain and putting it down somewhere physical. There's still some programs and tools that I need to learn to use in order to move forward, which will involve a lot of me going through tutorials and teaching myself how to use stuff. And I imagine that it will probably be a long time before I'll have anything tangible to show for it. In the meantime, I want to be able to put out more videos that aren't just like VODs and clips at an output that's a little more frequent than I've been putting out videos so far. I'm thinking of doing some storytime style videos set over like the less truncated versions of my speed paints, since for these videos I have to speed them up a lot, and I'm sure down the line I'll have other artwork to feature as well. I also have a couple of fun collab ideas that include some of my VTuber friends, so that should be fun. I'll of course still be working on the game and providing updates when I have them, but this way I can hopefully offer up a little bit more content for those of you that have been kind enough to subscribe so far. Also, before I go, I thought I'd give myself a quick self-promo. If you like my artwork and you have an OC or a D&D character or a Sona and you would like to have that character drawn by me, I am open to taking commissions. I'll include a link to my request page in the video description if you're interested. And if it just so happens that you prefer to use VGen for commissions, I'm currently working on getting verified over there, at least as of recording. But I'll add the link to my VGen page anyhow, so I don't have to like remember to come back and add it in the description. Anyhow, if you've stuck around this far, thanks so much for watching. It's been a pleasure making with you. Bye-bye.